From the Sunshine State, this is Tampa Bay's Tan Talk.
It's time for FLALAW, brought to you by the personal injury attorneys of Perenich, Caulfield, Avril Noyes. This hour will be informative, along with taking your questions and comments. Now, here are your hosts for today's show.
That's right. Welcome back to FLALAW live on the radio. It's good to have you here. Hopefully you are our faithful listener and you join us every Tuesday at 5. But if not, thank you for tuning in tonight. This is your live legal call-in talk show. As you heard, FLALAW live on the radio. And we are the personal injury attorneys at Perenich, Caulfield, Avril, and Noyes. And we're so glad that you tuned in tonight because I think it's going to be a really great show. I am here with my co-host and colleague, attorney Lorrie Robinson. My name is Jaclyn Bryant. Of course, I'll give Lorrie some time in a moment to introduce herself. You'll be hearing from the both of us tonight, talking about some current events and different things that have been in the news, which has been quite eventful these last few days, I would say, here locally in the Tampa Bay area, and not in the best way. There's been some sad and tragic news and just things that you don't always like to see happening in your area, in your community. But we are here to talk about it from the legal perspective, specifically from the civil point of view in terms of how some of these things can play out when they do end up in a courtroom on the civil litigation side of things. And of course, there's all kind of other implications that can come about. And so we do have a criminal defense lawyer who's be coming next week, and we're going to talk about some of the same things with him as well. But you get the civil side today because I do have my esteemed colleague who is a board-certified civil trial lawyer who has been doing civil litigation for quite a number of years. And so we're going to get her take and, of course, my 2 cents, if you will, on some of these topics and current events here in Clearwater and St. Pete and different things in our surrounding areas. But before we jump into the show, which I assure you will be really a good show for you to share with friends and family, especially those that are in the local community here in this area. But I'm going to tell you all the ways that you can continue to listen. And if you need to come back and listen later, I want you to have all that information in detail because we are streaming on various different ways. Not only are we live right now in the studio at WTAN 106.1 FM and also AM 1340, but we're also streaming as well. I just got our Facebook live stream going. We have our YouTube live stream going as well. So those are ways for you to not only listen in, but also comment. So if you want to comment questions or just have a little bit of dialogue about what we're discussing tonight, if you know more about the story that we're discussing and you want to add some information or facts to it, we'd love to hear from you. If you've been in a similar situation and you have questions about it, that's what we're here for. And this, like I said, this is your live legal call-in talk show. So you can call in live on the air, and Lorrie and I will answer your questions about the different topics that we'll be getting into tonight. So the live call-in number is 727-441-3000. Again, if you would like to call in and discuss what we're talking about tonight or have legal questions, the best way to do that is to call in at 727-441-3000. But like I mentioned before, we are also on Facebook and YouTube. So if you'd rather comment your question in the comment section, you can do that too. Because both those live streams are up and running, and I'm actually going to go ahead and share it on my personal page so that people can't find it. You can locate it there, but I want you to search Perenich, Caulfield, Avril Noyes Injury Lawyers. If you do that on Facebook or YouTube, that is how you'll find the live stream, and it's also how you can comment. So once you find it, if you see the little red circle kind of around our law firm logo, you click on that, it'll take you straight to your live feed. You'll see myself and Lorrie. We're here at the studio, and then you know you're in the right place. Once you have that going, of course, like I said, you should share it. Send it out to your families and friends. Send the link over to people that you think might be interested because I do think it'll be a very informative show for them tonight. Now, if you are one of those folks who, have a lot going on and you may not be able to finish the whole show tonight, that's okay. We got you covered as well, because we are also on all podcast platforms, just about Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, all of the above. You can find us there as well. So if you're not able to tune in for the full show tonight, that's okay. You can just go over to the podcast platforms, follow us, FLA Law on the radio. If you follow us on any of your podcast platforms, search FLA Law on the radio, you should be able to find the show, and then you'll get alerts anytime there's a new show posted. And of course, tonight's show will be posted after it's completed. Usually within a day or two, it's on the podcast platforms. So absolutely want to have you following us on the podcast platforms. That way, if you missed the live show, you won't miss much, because you can go back over and watch that. So again, thank you for joining us tonight, and I will turn over to Lorrie just to, of course, introduce herself again. For any new listeners we have out there who may not be familiar, feel free to say hello.
Well, Jaclyn, I always like it when it's the law firm Girl Power with you and I on the show together. So, of course, I've been with the law firm I'm coming up on the 28th year, which is hard to believe. And I was just recently renewing the board certification. You have to renew that every 5 years. And it's, of course, the civil trial certification. I thought, I can't believe that it's been 25 years.
Wow.
It's like, oh my goodness.
That's quite the accomplishment.
It's really something, it's hard to imagine how the time goes by. Yeah, but that's, I'm so grateful for being a part of the Perenich, Caulfield, Avril Noyes family, because we have a great environment where we do have the opportunity to engage very, very extensively in the area of civil trial law practice, and particularly, obviously, our particular specialty is personal injury.
Right. Absolutely. And so as we're getting into things tonight, obviously that's kind of the lens about which we'll be viewing many of these news articles that we go over from the personal injury perspective, as you mentioned. That is what we do at our firm at Perenich, Caulfield, Avril Noyes, is helping those that have been injured in various different personal injury type matters. And so as we go over some of these topics, obviously, a lot of them are very sensitive, and we are, of course, very compassionate to those that are dealing with this in real time. These are real issues, real cases, real things that are happening right now, and so that is not lost on us. And so when we talk about these things, we are looking at them from the perspective of if someone came to us with these kinds of scenarios and these kinds of cases, so that the public can be informed about what it all means, because a lot of times people have no idea after it happens, what happens next, and
right.
How are these going to play out? And is there a claim? Do I have a case? Are there avenues that can be pursued if I'm hurt and I'm injured in some of these kinds of scenarios? So I will definitely read out some of the articles that we're going to be talking about first, and then we'll jump into some questions. But again, if you have anything you'd like to add, definitely call in at 727-441-3000, or you can comment on our live stream. I'm going to make sure I get our live streams going. We have some little bit of technical difficulties with Facebook, but I think we'll be up and running here in just a second. But the first article we're going to be talking about is very, very sad, unfortunately. It's dealing with kind of a shocking headline for a St. Pete garbage truck driver who sadly has been accused of running over and killing someone in a downtown St. Pete alleyway a few days ago. So I want to go over the article and read it a little bit, let people know what's going on in case you haven't heard. It has been on the news quite a bit. But for those that haven't heard about it, a St. Petersburg garbage truck driver has been charged after police say he ran over a woman twice in an alley on Saturday morning and then drove away. Apparently, the backstory is this. According to the arrest affidavit, the driver was accused of killing a woman that was 49 years old as she slept in an alleyway in downtown St. Pete early one Saturday morning. The woman was believed to may have been homeless. She was reportedly sleeping alongside some other people in the alleyway at 17 3rd Street North in St. Pete. And the police say that the garbage truck driver was a longtime city employee, and he backed his garbage truck into the alley to pick up a dumpster. When he backed up, he ran over the victim, according to Police Chief Anthony Holloway, and said as he pulled forward, he hit her again. And the bystanders apparently say that the bystander apparently said that they gave some warnings. I'm not clear on how that happened, but according to the arrest affidavit, a bystander had warned the driver that people were sleeping in the alley before the incident occurred. They say that the driver does not have any type of criminal history, but he obviously has been criminally charged for leaving the scene. He's facing a charge of leaving the scene of a crash involving death. It looks like the witness that was there, I guess he was someone that was sleeping alongside this woman, says that at the time of the crash, they had simply been hanging out there, had gotten tired, and decided to rest in that alleyway. And apparently the woman that was killed was a little further out into the road. And he believes that the garbage truck driver just didn't see her. But he was asleep apparently during the incident when it happened. And he actually was woken up when the police had arrived. And he looked over her and said that it was obviously a horrendous sight to behold. So that's obviously very, very tragic. Detectives are still investigating. They're looking for video, talking to witnesses, so forth and so on. The driver did have his first appearance in court already, and his bond was set at $50,000. He has posted that bond. As a condition of his bond, he's not allowed to drive. And he looks like no new court date has been set yet.
They say how old a man he is at all?
The driver?
Yeah.
51 years old.
51, okay. All right.
51 years old, and the victim was 49, not much younger. So, it's hard to even know where to begin because it's absolutely horrible what happened to this woman.
Yes.
And then it's part of you wants to believe that he couldn't possibly have known that she was there. But, then there's facts that says he was warned before it happened. So let's kind of break this down because the story is obviously shocking, and I've seen it's actually seemed kind of polarizing. I've seen some social media discord about it. Some people are like, "Oh my gosh, we feel for this woman," and then some people are like, this driver, they have sympathy towards him.
I actually do have sympathy for him.
Yeah.
But of course, as we'll discuss, there's a lot of legal issues that come to the floor, so to speak. In our social compact as we live together.
Yeah, and so where do you even begin? From a civil standpoint, when you're looking at a case like this, where do you start? Where do you look at?
So I think one of the things always important for people to appreciate, and a lot of times they don't, is in the civil arena, we are looking at, is there negligence on the part of someone that caused damage? And that's really rooted in how would a reasonable person act, what would a reasonable person know, that kind of thing. And that's really the issue. So this is one of the most horrific things I've heard.
Yeah.
It really is. It's haunting, actually, because I just can't imagine. So I asked about his age because I'd missed that, but I thought, it's like something was missing because I just can't imagine that the man intended this,
right.
But that doesn't necessarily absolve him or, in this situation, his employer, the city from responsibility because the question is, well, how is it that he didn't recognize the circumstances here?
That's the $1 million question.
Yeah, it really is.
Right. There are some photos online that kind of show the area, and it's somewhat dim, so it's not like a well-lit. It is an alley,
right?
So alleyways are not necessarily brightly lit, and it's very narrow looking almost. So it looks like it is something that's pretty narrow and very dark. So I don't know how that necessarily factors into his perception, But it seems like this is something that he may have been doing for years, So how does that play into you in terms of the fact that he was a long-term city employee? So it sounds like maybe he had been driving garbage trucks for a while. We don't really know how familiar he was with this alleyway per se, but from that standpoint, where the city comes in, how do you think that?
Yeah, I think, the questions that I would most want answered here would be, we could also observe that you don't expect for people to be sleeping in an alleyway.
Exactly.
That's clearly, none of us are looking for that. Mm-hmm. If we have the additional facts that seem to be here, because unfortunately and sadly, homelessness is an issue, and many times these are people that have mental health issues and not very good judgment. So if you know that that's an area that is a particular issue in, it does seem like, acting in the exercise of reasonable care, you would have a duty to be more observant. In other words, you wouldn't necessarily be entitled to assume nobody is supposed to be sleeping in an alleyway. And obviously there would be huge negligence on the part of the person who was sleeping in the alleyway. But we're going to presume that if you're sleeping in the alleyway, you don't really have much wherewithal, that you've got a lot of issues.
Exactly.
So I think that's the real issue, and it does appear, at least from the newspaper level. Now, and then I think the other part of it is, honestly, the story is unfolding as if he rolled over the lady twice. And that's the way it seems. Yeah, and obviously he fled the scene because after that occurred, he realized, oh my gosh, the worst. That's why my heart does go out.
Or it begs the question: did he even know that he did it?
Well, that's true. That's a good point. Could be that he had no clue. He's just kind of going through the motions of something he's done a zillion different times and never has had such a thing occur. But I think it's particularly if it is the case, which I would highly suspect that this is somewhat of an issue in the area.
I would agree. Yeah.
And then I kind of wonder, under those circumstances, and shouldn't the city, frankly, in the exercise of training, but
how they address it?
Wouldn't you really have to go sort of the extra mile, have maybe extra lighting on the truck, something that
sensors, of some kind. I mean, I don't know how well equipped they are, but just ordinary passenger vehicles these days, you get dings and bings, all kinds of vehicles they make now. If someone's beside you or something's behind you, or something's, the cars, I don't know if you've been in some of these newer vehicles, but it's like the car will literally vibrate and shake, let you know someone's backing up. So I don't know if the city vehicles are equipped to that degree, but it begs the question is whether or not these kinds of things need to be put in place.
And then, we've talked before, but the obligations of the city are a little different than...
Let's get into that, because it seems very clear that he was in the course and scope of his employment at the time of this accident. So there's nothing in this article that suggests that he was on the way to work or he was in a city garbage truck completing his duties as a city employee. With that being said, where does the city come into play, and what potential liabilities does the city have?
So it really does come into play in terms of evaluating his conduct as an employee of the city in terms of negligence. That's really the issue. And it's kind of, so what we've talked about before is that the sovereign, the government entity, is can only be sued for things that the law has actually expressly permitted a lawsuit to be brought for, and that's goes back to the old common law days of the king, and you couldn't sue the king, I guess, but in our context, because it's the government. There wouldn't be a list long enough for all the things we'd like to sue the government for, but then we're suing ourselves and our own purse, basically in a sense. Yeah. So for matters of public policy, the law limits what you can actually sue the government for. And even though we might have a bunch of great ideas about what the policies should be that the city should follow in this kind of a situation, and one I think we could put in the bank, not to use that expression lightly, that the city will, if they don't have policies already, they will, after such a horrific event as this, to try to better address these things. Yeah. But presumably, I'm sure they do have policies that they've already established that would concern themselves with how these large vehicles have to be handled, that kind of thing.
I'd imagine that there's probably extensive procedure.
I would think so. Yeah, but there may be certain things like where we might say, they should have a light or this or that. That may or may not be something you can sue the city for, because if it's something more in the lines of a planning level decision, what they should do in certain situations, that's different than simply their failure to exercise reasonable care in following the policies that they already have in place that would have an impact on someone and actually cause damage. So it can be tricky. And then on top of all of that, if you can sue, which you would certainly be able to sue in this situation, because this is kind of a ordinary negligence type claim, but you then are subject to certain limits in terms of the nature of the damages.
Let's talk about that, because this is a death. We're talking about a fatality where this person is no longer living. If her family or personal representative, however it ended up being, came to us or came to you and wanted to make that claim, what is the cap? Is there a cap? Is there a ceiling? And if so, what would that be?
Yeah, so the cap is currently $200,000. I think there's been discussion about raising it, which they need to.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's many years ago it was $100,000, and then many years ago after that they finally raised it to $200,000. But that would be the maximum that you could recover from the city if they were found to be responsible.
Even with death.
Even with death.
That's a hard pill, I think, for a lot of people to swallow.
Yeah. And as we have shared previously, it's a very complex area, but there are instances when a larger award made by a jury can be presented to the Florida legislature in what's called a claims bill to actually recover more than the statutory limit. But that's so unusual, very rare case that will ever occur with.
That you actually have to go through the process of a bill, go through legislation.
So it's a practical matter.
Voted on, and then the governor has to sign off on it.
Yeah, so it's not something that happens too often.
Right, not at all.
So in that situation, you're really limited to that statutory cap, which for a serious injury, or in this case a death, of course, seems quite low.
Right. Now, you mentioned policies and procedures. That's obviously something that I think any attorney would want to know, what it was the city's policies and procedures in situations like this, especially like as we've mentioned, that you think of downtown St. Pete. I think it's known that there's, a homeless population in that area. Let's assume, just for sake of tonight's show, that the city realizes how sensational this is and how sad it is and shocking, that they accept liability. They admit liability in a case like this, which may not be a bad idea for the city. If that were the case, well, then would the policies and procedures and the things that they have, is that still an important part of the case if they say, we admit that there was negligence here?
In that scenario, if they actually admit it, which it's not impossible, because it's such a horrific case, and with an employee that had been there for a number of years apparently, and they'll know obviously the facts that we don't know.
We wouldn't,
really.
Right?
We're just looking at a newspaper article kind of thing, but I don't know that the policies and procedures as such would have anything to offer. If they admit responsibility, liability, they admit they're negligent, then the only question is the amount of the damages, actually, Right. Yeah, but usually it's pretty hard to get these government entities to admit things. But
especially these days, I've been seeing them be very, very difficult as of late.
But I can imagine this is not one that they will like the publicity of, for sure, because it's just such an incredible tragedy. And it may well be, because it's not like the facts themselves are really in dispute as far as what occurred.
Right.
Yeah. Now, we probably have another issue as to presumably someone comes forward, but here's a homeless person. Where's their family? Because there'd have to be an estate set up, and there'd have to be survivors that would be
absolutely
entitled to make a claim for damages for the loss.
Which can be challenging sometimes when you have a homeless person that's the decedent. There's not always that connection to be able to find the people that need to bring the claim. It can be difficult, especially if they're vagrants, they travel, and you don't quite know where they are coming from. Now, with that being said, I wanted to talk to you about the allegation that someone had warned the driver before. This article isn't very clear as to who warned him, how he was warned, or anything like that, but there's this allegation that someone warned the driver that people were sleeping in the alley before it occurred. Legally, why is that important?
Well, obviously, if he's on notice of what occurred, that completes and removes any doubt about negligence. It also, although with the city, I don't know that you can really make a claim for punitive damages, but in that scenario, if you can show truly egregious conduct, but then you have another little tiny wrinkle in all of this, and that is that if, for example, he really acted intentionally, which it's hard to imagine that he did, but if he acted intentionally, that is not something the city would be responsible for in that setting.
That's a very good point. I didn't think of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little, sometimes you'll see that come up like in situations of civil rights actions, police misconduct, and that sort of thing. And maybe the perception is that the officer was acting actually with a degree of intent. That's not negligence, and the law only permits the suit against the government entity for negligence.
Exactly.
If the employee really was crazed, totally acting outside the bounds of his normal responsibilities, then only he would be responsible, not the government entity.
Right, and those are facts that we just don't know. We are operating off of just the limited information we have in this news article. But going back to a little fact that was mentioned in the article, I want to try to flip it the other way here. We're putting on our city attorney hat for a moment. There was information about the woman being more out into the roadway than the other people that were sleeping there. And it makes me think of comparative fault.
No, right.
Under the new law that we now have with the greater than 50% rule, where you no longer have a claim.
Yes, I would say
so
that.
So how do you feel about that if you put on your city attorney hat?
Yeah, I really, because of course I always have the other hat on. No, but that's a very good point because, and honestly, you look at something like this, it's an interesting argument because there's zero doubt that actually the person that was sleeping in the alleyway is well more than 50% responsible, if not arguably completely.
You don't sleep in the alley.
But on the other hand, if that person isn't really especially competent, which is likely because they wouldn't be sleeping in the middle, maybe they're passed out drunk or whatever it is, the person is not competent really,
Right.
Yeah, so I do think it really boils down to the level of knowledge that was had about that particular location. If it really, even if it was just a general thing, I think it's going to be difficult.
Yeah, that's obviously a big factor. I think that's going to tug on a lot of people is the fact that he left.
But as you point out, maybe he didn't know.
And that's my biggest question is, my goodness, you're scratching your head. Like, did he even realize that he had hit this woman?
Yeah. So,
to not only go over her and then allegedly come back over her and then leave, to me that sounds like a person that had no idea. I don't know. And
honestly, it's part of this. So these are the things it's what makes law so interesting because, it's each case is totally different. And obviously, in this scenario, again, it's hard for me to believe that a person, maybe he was having some various issues. Maybe he has sleep apnea and doesn't sleep well. Maybe he's got things that are not making him very cognitively aware. Yeah. Maybe those are all things that the county or the city should have also been staying up to date on. It could be any number of things, but something probably did impair his level of awareness because, again, I mean, it's...
I don't see any mention in the article of the time of day, so that I don't know either. So I don't know if this is...
6:30?
6:30 in the morning.
Still, okay. So it's still dark?
Still quite early, so this is in the, probably the beginning, the first part of his shift, maybe that has some factor to it that he's not quite, fully there. He's just starting out his day, but I don't know. I just feel like some of our listeners may be thinking, there's someone sleeping in the alley. How does she have a case? And
right. Well, I mean, there's some problems with it.
There's problems.
It's such an egregious event, and that it does speak of how does it happen.
But there's also the question of how do you run over someone allegedly twice and not know it?
And I have to say, I was kind of assuming, and I'd have to think about how dark it is now at 6:30.
At 6:30.
If it's at all twilight,
Depends
you should be able to see it.
Yeah.
But I mean, if
it's
dark,
we're on the radio, so you can't see pictures. But the alley it's kind of dark.
Yeah,
from the photos that I saw.
That would, to me, that I was kind of hearing it as being very early and still, not sunrise. So, but that would make a big difference, obviously, too, because if it's really dark, you can't see. But if it's lighter, then it's like,
Yeah, very, very much a big tragedy. And again, I think we're going to see how this plays out. And I think there's just a lot of facts that we don't know. And it's sad on both sides. I have sympathy for both the driver and the family of the decedent. You just very terrible to hear those kinds of things happening in the news. And then the next article is not any better. We went from bad to more bad, I guess.
Couldn't believe it would happen here in Clearwater.
And it's the thing of it is, I had heard about it, and I thought, a lot of sheriffs and things had kind of made some commotion about it, like don't come here with this kind of thing, and then yet here again it happens here locally. So we're talking about the teen takeover. Right, so this has been all over the news. Even before this happened, I know that Sheriff Grady Judge in Polk County had been doing press conferences telling people that it's not acceptable, it's not going to happen. And then unfortunately, just over the weekend here in Clearwater Beach, it happens. So multiple arrests after teen takeover at Clearwater Beach. The story basically goes that Clearwater police are investigating a shooting that happened at Clearwater Beach on Sunday evening just off of Coronado Drive near Pier 60. Police say that this was a planned event, that they have basically deemed these teen takeovers that erupted into violence. There was a 17-year-old who was shot and injured and taken to the hospital. After the shooting, police say that several fights broke out in the area. And according to the Clearwater police, there were hundreds of teens at the beach that evening. Many disturbances, including fights, happened near that Pier 60 area just after 5 o'clock. The article was later updated to show that at the time, no suspect had been arrested. But I think I had heard maybe today in some news thing that I was listening to, did they get somebody? Have you heard about it? They did.
16-year-old.
Yeah, they do have a suspect now in custody. So I thought that this was not current because there is someone now in custody who's also a teenager, a minor. It's believed that many of those involved in Sunday's event came from outside of the Clearwater area. From what they're saying, it looks like Hillsborough County, Polk County, and many other locations kind of converged into the Clearwater Beach area.
They didn't go to Polk County because Sheriff, who,
he definitely said not to come here. Yeah,
Kid's residence was in Polk County.
Yeah.
Oh.
The actual suspect that. Oh wow,
yeah.
That's interesting.
Okay, so they listened to their sheriff, but they came over here. So, of the multiple people that were detained for investigative purposes. One is facing criminal charges. There was a teen from Brandon who was also charged with obstructing or resisting an officer without violence, some unlawful carrying of a concealed firearm. This is a 17-year-old, in possession of a firearm by a minor under the age of 18. This particular teen ran from the scene of the shooting and was detained shortly thereafter. The shooting victim apparently remains hospitalized, but is expected to be okay.
Oh, good.
And that was at the time this article was written, so I don't know what his status is right now. From what we see, teen takeovers have been happening across the country, so it's not just here locally. But Deputy Police Chief Michael Wallach said that the behavior won't be tolerated here in Clearwater. This was the first weekend of summer break at Clearwater Beach, and he wants everyone to be very, very clear to anyone who plans to come here and plans to engage in that kind of behavior. Don't do it. If you do, your trip to the beach will end up to be a trip to jail. So it looks like 22 teens were arrested after the takeover. And then there's been some others, they said, in Curtis Hickson Park in Tampa that resulted in multiple arrests. And then there was one in Icon Park in Orlando back in late April where 2 deputies were injured while trying to break up fights. 9 teens between the ages of 13 and 16 were arrested. My question is, where are the parents? Where are the parents? So, with that being said, of course, we are looking at this from a civil lens, if you will. But there's a lot going on here. So we have a shooting of a minor that was shot by a minor, allegedly, as a result of this big gathering. So we have Clearwater Beach. We've got businesses, restaurants. Pier 60 is obviously a huge tourist attraction. So when something like this happens, where someone is injured or in this case shot in a public place like this, what liability or responsibility do we have for the businesses or for the government entity?
I think, Beach? This is, I think unfortunately, in a setting like this, it's a law enforcement function, and they didn't appear to be prepared for it,
right.
is what it sounds like. And, we haven't had anything quite like that, but they've had these events going on down in South Florida that, and the spring breaks have been not here so much, but in South Florida they've had major issues. But so again,
I think these kinds of things do happen in other places. Like even in my generation, you'd hear about this stuff in Miami or South Beach, and they had shut it down, and they had kind of kept a lot of this from happening. But you're not really here in Clearwater.
No, and that's right. And so that's and I think now. So let's imagine. Because they're really kind of congregating on the beach. It's not like they're going to a particular business. But if you had, for example, a situation, imagine a hotel, like I could imagine down in South Florida or something, that is opening itself up to have people come. Now these are kids; they shouldn't, shouldn't be drinking or anything.
Right.
But say that they were being hosted. And that there's going to be a large number of people and that there have been issues, then you start to build a case or argument for security responsibilities of some establishment. I don't really actually see that here, though, because it sounds like you just had a bunch of people that congregate on the beach, and what the heck is some business supposed to do?
And so this isn't like, an organized event, like a festival or some sort of expo where it's pre-planned, there's permitting, there's all these sorts of things and measures that are to be in place. This is some informal gathering that maybe not foreseeable for the business owners and restaurant owners and things like that, or even the city in this case.
Yeah, I think they obviously didn't get it because
they didn't get the memo.
Right. Because this is such a tragedy for all the kids involved.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned the parents. So with minor children, which that's even more outrageous than anything, isn't it? Really, that there be minors that would be.
That's actually a comment we got on our Facebook Live. So this person, Sneeda D, says parents need to be held accountable as well. So if we're talking, let's think of it this way. So there's obviously someone who was shot and injured. Let's say this individual is now looking to pursue a claim. Is there an avenue for negligent supervision here of parents who have teens who are essentially running wild, and they have guns apparently, concealed weapons in there, causing this kind of harm? Is there anything that can be made against the actual parents? not criminally, obviously.
We're talking civil. It's criminally, they could potentially, but it would have to be rooted in actual knowledge based on prior acts of the type of conduct we're talking about.
Okay.
I mean, I think the parent...
Explain, what do you mean by
well,
that?
I think it's, so now, having said that, the way these kids acted, there probably is some, knowledge of this. But if you know that your child, certainly, if you know that they have a firearm, I mean, that you should take some responsibility, obviously. But I think there have been some cases around the country where parents have been held responsible in different settings. But you do have to, have some foreknowledge that the parent should have known. Now, so I don't know. And then, of course, to sue the person, this is, really you have to have a person that would have assets that could respond to a judgment or, insurance, which, it's very, because it's going to be failing to exercise their responsibility over their child, but it's not going to be easy in this setting. We'd have to, as we say all the time, everything is very fact specific. This, to me, all I really know is kind of what you read and what I sort of heard, and saw some pictures. So it just seemed like it's almost like a riot type situation.
Almost,
not quite, but almost.
And so I don't know, and maybe someone that's listening to our feed may know, I don't know how these kids organize these things, because obviously they're getting the word out somehow.
Yeah, it must be some type of meetup or some type of thing. So
I don't know if this is social media, and
that might be an interesting idea. That's one area that more responsibility needs to be assigned. So let's imagine that it's some app that you're much younger than me. You'd be closer to knowing, but even you don't know. Right?
Not in this case.
But some app that is helping kids to organize these types of gatherings, which are not just social gatherings, really. And particularly as every time it's reported.
What we got?
That was circulated.
Okay, so this makes sense. So they're circulating these flyers on, it looks like social media posts. So maybe this is like Instagram or Facebook. And so they're coordinating the meetups. And looks like it's a flyer that says Clearwater Beach link up May 31st, Clearwater Beach aftermath. So they're promoting these as they're like parties and social gatherings. So my question to you is going to be, if this stuff is circulating, Ed found this, our producer, this is in like a Largo Clearwater happenings type group, it looks like. So if this kind of stuff is circulating all around social media, it's in local groups, the kids are finding out about it somehow. Does that shift the notice component of it or the foreseeability component of it? If the word is getting out and it's circulating, do the business owners or the city, the police department somehow have a duty to say, hey, we see this is coming and we need to beef up our security?
Well, I think that I would certainly say that the police department does, but that's not something we're going to be able to bring a claim against them for, because you really are not at liberty to sue the police for failing to enforce the law, so to speak. And these are planning level things. So these are things that they do have responsibility for, but not really civil liability usually.
Right.
It would be an unusual set of circumstances. The businesses, you'd have to know a lot more about how this went down, because obviously this, people are.
So our comments said they post a lot on TikTok, Instagram, private groups, and their close friends, so they get the word out.
They get the word out, media. And then you get tons of people there, and then obviously now it's public knowledge that. Maybe they do this without these incidents, but obviously there have been a lot of incidents, because we've heard about it all over our state now and other areas. So, but I don't know really. Again, you could look at parental responsibility.
One of these looks like it's an actual promoter of some kind. So it makes
I'd like
me
to know
wonder
a lot more about that.
Yeah, if they're capitalizing off of this, we know that their crowds are coming, so we might as well market to them
There's some sort of link-up party afterwards, it says, in Tampa, and if you notice, it's cash only.
Yeah. So it makes me think about event organizers who know that these influx of teenagers are coming and they're capitalizing off of it. They're organizing events. To me, that's slightly different than what we were talking about at the beach, where this is like a, unforeseeable thing. If, in fact, these things are being promoted and capitalized on, and then we have these kind of violence break out, does that change your evaluation on foreseeability or liability?
Right, and in terms of like local business establishments, you're saying?
If they're like this, obviously our listeners can't see the flyer, but it looks like some sort of party or club promotion that's the Clearwater Beach aftermath link up, and then they're promoting this party. It's a cash, girls get in for cheaper.
So is it at a particular location, or is it?
It is, but I don't know what it is. It just has the address. So I don't know if it's a bar or a restaurant. I don't know.
Yeah. So
I'd have to Google the address.
Yeah, but I did think, so that would, because now you're kind of suggesting things that create a possibility that someone who was organizing this, who certainly has a duty to exercise reasonable care, is exercising actually zero care in how this is handled. Because I would think that that would potentially create more of a path of responsibility, because I didn't realize that it was to any real degree organized. But that starts to look
there
like
is a lot that was going on as far as the promoting of it. So with that being said, if we're talking about areas, again, this is something that's obviously does not happen here in Clearwater Beach area, but let's take it back to areas like South Beach or Miami or Panama, the bigger spring break areas where you know that these people are coming, they come every year, and that, let's say, these types of crime breaks out, there's fights, it just happens all the time. You have this level of, prior incident and pre-existing problems, but they allow these events to continue to happen year after year. If that were the case, does that change anything as far as the analysis with prior crime?
Definitely could. I mean, Florida did pass several more restrictive laws several years ago on premise security and to try to give business owners and operators a way to protect themselves if they follow certain preventive measures, and it might be lighting in a parking lot, or it might be security guards, which something like this actually suggests if you are in any way participating in allowing people coming to enjoy this event, I do think there would certainly be an argument about, if you know what this is about, then maybe there is an argument that you do need to have security, some way to control the way people are behaving and try to avoid the kind of things we saw. So that, and it's the organizational character of this that starts to open that up as something that would be looked at.
Absolutely. Now, we're going to talk about this more next week as well with a criminal defense lawyer. He is a former prosecutor, and he now does criminal defense work. And so we're going to get his perspective on these teen takeovers as well. I think he'll have an interesting take on it. But before we go, I do want to touch on this last article while we have time, because I think this is interesting too, especially in the summertime. We have a lot more teen drivers on the road. I think parents are at work, they allow the kids to have their keys, and they're driving their friends around, and things happen. So I wanted to talk to you about this last case involving a 15-year-old driver. Apparently in Clearwater recently, there was a 15-year-old driver driving at a high rate of speed who crashed his car into a home in Clearwater late last Tuesday night. According to the Florida Highway Patrol, he was in a Dodge Durango, 15 years old, and was traveling northbound on South Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue when he lost control of the car. The teen departed the roadway near Hall Street. He struck multiple traffic control devices and utility fixtures before entering the property that was located on South Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue, hitting the home and a vehicle that was at the home. The couple who lived there in the home, thankfully, were not injured. But they tell 8 on Your Side of the News that speeding on that avenue is a regularly occurring problem. And they have gone to, I guess, Pinellas County leaders to try to consider installing speed bumps and other traffic calming measures on that road to prevent future issues like what they experienced. Because they said they get racers on that street all the time. And they just want the neighborhood to be a little bit safer. Fortunately, the teen himself suffered non-life-threatening injuries and was transported to a nearby hospital. So we have one of those stories is like a nightmare for any homeowner.
Oh, yes.
And then we have a speeding teenager who arguably may not even have a valid driver's license.
Right. You have to wonder what the situation is because he is 15.
Right. So how does that play out when you have a child who's a minor? Are we looking at the parents? Are we looking at the child? How does that work?
We certainly be looking at the parents, and I guess they don't say whether who's the owner of the car. Is it the parents' car that the child has taken? Yeah, and so there would be responsibility there. Did the child take the car and the parents didn't know? But
that's very true.
But what efforts were made to secure the car so that wouldn't happen? Since it would appear that this young man. Not ready to be driving on his own.
Right, absolutely. So assuming the parent is the owner of the vehicle, then we have a parent who's responsible here for it.
Right, and of course that is, as we've talked many times about, a vehicle is considered a dangerous instrumentality, which it obviously is, and that consideration under the law means that if you allow someone to drive your vehicle, you are responsible if they act negligently. So sometimes what happens, obviously, and it could be in this situation, maybe the kid took the keys and nobody knew, but then there are all sorts of issues about how that could occur. And because if you have not given consent, that it's different. But if it's your child, you're going to be responsible.
Right, exactly. And typically, do you see insurance companies handling cases like these any differently than they normally would when it's involving a minor child, or maybe even a child who has no driver's license, or maybe has a learner's permit, but they weren't in the vehicle with someone with a license? Do you see that affecting the claims at all?
Now, I haven't personally. What are you thinking about with that?
No, I just wonder if people should be aware of, the impact of, because to me, I don't think it really has much, of someone driving a vehicle that is not licensed. I think a lot of people have passionate thoughts about, this person didn't even have a license, and I think they find it to be more egregious, and that there should be more that can be made about that issue.
Right. No, I don't think so much. No, I don't think
of an impact.
So much there. Now, I think here is going to be, rooted in the child. How does this child shouldn't have been driving? And that, but because most likely the parent is going to say, "Well, I had no idea," But I wouldn't say, because certainly we do see situations where people do not have a valid driver's license. It's not a good thing.
It's not a good thing, but we see it often.
Right.
And it doesn't necessarily have a huge impact.
Yeah, because the issue is the negligence, and that in and of itself doesn't have anything to do with that unless the person doesn't know how to drive, and then it matters. Yeah.
So cases like this can still move forward, even if it's a minor child behind the wheel who didn't have a valid license. You still want to give us a call. There's still claims that can be made against the parents and the vehicle
And
owners.
as you can tell, there's a whole lot to it. Every situation is so different.
Definitely. So that's our show for tonight. We hope you enjoyed it. There was quite the shocking and sensational story. So share it with friends, family. Follow us on the podcast platforms. We will see you back next Tuesday with FLA Law live on the radio. Folks, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week. Thanks.